Good evening and welcome everybody. I am Dr. Sten Ekberg and I'm excited to have you here. We're going to talk about User Manual for Humans Part 3. And today is the first, and there'll possibly be some more talks on food for humans. So I call it food for humans so that it's kind of a little funny, but we want to start thinking about humans. How many people here realize that you are an animal? Hands up. Okay. So basically, if you're not an animal, then you must be either mineral or plant. And we tend to forget that we are humans and that we are animals. And that's why I phrase it that way. That we're part of nature, we're part of biology. And the food that we eat, therefore, also has to be fitting for us. So when we talk about food, there's two aspects of it, and most people focus only on the physical matter of food. They talk about the components and what the food can do for us in terms of fuel and what the food can do for us in terms of building blocks. And the building blocks are protein and carbohydrates and fat, and then there's some minerals and vitamins as catalysts. And it's well enough if we put it into the body. But there's also the other aspect of food is the act of incorporation. We have to bring it into the body somehow. And there's several steps involved there, and the first is mastication, that's chewing. We have to start preparing, we have to make smaller pieces of the food so our bodies can start using it. The second part is digestion, where we continue to break the food apart. And then we start attacking it and making it smaller and smaller pieces with secretions of digestive enzymes, and then we move it around with peristalsis. That's the movement of the intestines that move the food forward and kind of churn it around. And once all that is done, we have to absorb the food. And after that, we have chemical processes of building things up called anabolism. And that's simply another word for building up. And then whatever part of the food that we can't use, we have to get rid of and excrete. And if we don't excrete it properly, then we get toxic. So excretion is also the first form of detoxification. So we want to talk about, everybody here knows that you're supposed to eat more vegetables and you're supposed to eat less sugar and don't drink too many beers. Everybody knows that, but what we want to focus on are the whys. We want to ask the question, why don't we want to do that, or do we want to do that? What is the process in the body? What happens when we eat certain foods? So next, we put food into our mouths and then it enters the digestive tract. So what is the digestive tract? And the simplest way of looking at it is that it's a long tube. It has a hole in one end and it has a hole in the other end. That's what the digestive system is. And it's important to understand that because just because you've put something in your mouth does not strictly mean that it is inside your body. And when I say that, I mean that the functional tissue of your body is inside the cell. The machinery and the decisions and all of the regeneration and the DNA, everything that is part of that complex machinery is inside the cells. And unless we can get the foodstuffs inside the cell, it's not really going to do anything. So we put the food in one end of the tube and it comes out the other end of the tube. And whatever we extract of the food to make use of is an active process. And that's very important to understand, because if we don't have that active process, if that active process isn't working properly, then we're not going to absorb a whole lot of nutrients. Theoretically, it's possible to put things in one end and have every piece of useful thing come out the other end, and eating was basically useless. What we also need to understand is we've talked a lot about sympathetic and parasympathetic, where the stress fires off the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system handles the processes of digestion. So what this means is when we are in a state of stress, we are sacrificing our parasympathetic nervous system, and we are not able to absorb very much nutrients from the food. So you can be stressed and eat the perfect diet and not absorb very much useful nutrients. So that's crucial to understand, because everybody talks about, oh, eat this, eat this, eat this. Nobody talks about take a 5-minute siesta, take a 5-minute breathing session, relax before, during, and after your meal so you can actually use the food. Weight gain. We're going to touch very, very quickly on a few misconceptions, and we're open to questions, and then we're going to expand on them in future sessions. But weight gain is when your food is absorbed faster than it's used. So it's not so much how much, the quantity of food or calories that you eat that will make you gain weight, but there needs to be a balance between how quickly the food enters your bloodstream relative to how quickly your body will use it. So any excess portion, anything that you absorb faster than you burn, the excess has to be stored. And the human body is very limited in storing energy. It can basically do it in two forms, and one is as glycogen. That's a carbohydrate storage in the muscles and the liver, but you can only store maybe 100 to 200 grams. That's about 4, 5, 6, 700 calories worth. Anything more than that, you have to store as fat. Your body has no other way of doing it. So the excess typically gets converted to fat. And you have an unlimited ability to store fat. You can store a couple of million calories of fats very, very easily, but only a few hundred calories of carbohydrates, and that's why the excess so quickly gets turned into fat. Also, we must understand that the only thing that can store fat on your body, the only thing that can store energy, is called insulin. Insulin is a hormone that takes sugar from the blood and takes it out of the blood and into the cells. So without insulin, you cannot store anything. And that means unless you trigger an insulin response, you cannot have a fat gain. So weight gain is caused by foods that trigger insulin. And which ones are those? They're anything that raises blood sugar, anything that gets absorbed into the bloodstream quickly, and this is primarily sugar, starch, and alcohol. So anytime that we eat those three, we jack up our blood sugar very quickly. Anytime we stay away from those three, we're going to have a much more level blood sugar. So weight gain is not caused by the number of calories. It's caused by how quickly those calories are absorbed. And therefore, weight gain is not caused by eating fat, because fat and protein do not trigger an insulin response. They're absorbed so slowly into the body that you do not evoke an insulin response, and therefore those two foodstuffs, fat and protein, are not very much responsible for weight gain. I have to read, when I looked for a food pyramid, and I found this article on the champion breakfasts. And breakfast number 1, skim milk, half a banana, 1 serving of oatmeal with no calorie butter spray, Splenda, and a dash of cinnamon. So right away we have skim milk. We've taken away the fat that gives us a sense of satiety. We're talking about pasteurized milk, probably, which is very, very unsuitable for human consumption. Half a banana is a sugary fruit that will raise your blood sugar. 1 serving of oatmeal will raise your blood sugar. Splenda is a pesticide. So you're eating all this processed altered food that is no good for humans, that jack up the blood sugar, and then you dash some pesticides on it. And this is, in most people's eyes, a very suitable and healthy, good diet breakfast. Breakfast number 2, 2 egg whites plus 1 egg yolk and an egg yolk and a dash of skim milk, scrambled, no calorie cooking spray. Have a cup of skim milk and a slice of whole grain bread with no calorie butter. So all the way through, they're talking about take away everything that gives you satiety. Take away all the fat that makes you feel full, and instead, everything that they suggest is low-fat, altered milk and grains, all of which will raise your blood sugar and get converted into fat. So it doesn't matter how much or little fat you eat, your body is going to make what it needs, and the more carbs that you eat, the more fat you're going to make. The food pyramid. The classic view is at the bottom is the foundation. We have bread, we have pasta, we have grains, cereals, and so forth. And they're telling us to eat 6 to 11 servings per day of this stuff. And the more that you study this stuff and the more you talk to people who really know, they're going to tell you this stuff